It had been a day of rough and tumble. Katie learned that even pillows can hurt when someone hits you a little too hard. Orbie found out that if you do 3 somersaults in a row, you get really dizzy. And they both discovered that sharing a friend can be a lot of fun. Miguel was visiting for the whole day. After lunch, Mom looked around at the living room. It was a bit upside down. She suggested playing outside. The friends didn't need any convincing, and in a flash, they were gone. Once they were outside, they saw Mrs. Perrette checking her mailbox. Katie called to her and asked if they could play in her willow tree. Miguel looked at his 2 friends. He couldn't figure out why on earth they would want to do that. Mrs. Perrette told them that she and the tree would be delighted. Katie grabbed Miguel's hand, and in a flash, they were at the tree. Miguel walked in through the branches and was surprised to find on the other side it was hollow. The branches made a little shell around the tree, and once inside, no one could see you. There was a low branch, just right for climbing. Now Miguel understood why Katie and Orbie wanted to play in the willow. It was sort of magical. Katie immediately suggested they play a game of wizards. They could pretend that this magic tree was their forest home. Everybody loved the idea, and they began to play. Katie picked up 3 willow wands. She told her wizard friends to be careful. The magic in the wands was really strong. Everybody giggled. Orbie tooted to his friends that he was a very powerful wizard, and he spun around to prove it. Miguel waved his wand as he told his friends he was so powerful he could actually, with the wave of his willow wand, make the birds sing. Katie and Orbie smiled at that. He waved his wand furiously, and then, in a very magical way, he said, "Buzz-zam!" At first, there was silence, and then one bird started to sing, and another sang back, and soon the yard was full of birds singing their songs. Katie and Orbie were so impressed with the extraordinary magic of Miguel, they clapped. Then Orbie stretched up tall, poking his wand way up high in the sky, and he made circles in the air. And he trumpeted, "He, Wizard Orbis." Katie and Miguel chuckled at the sound of it. Well, he said, Wizard Orbis could actually cause the flowers in Mrs. Perrette's garden to bloom with his unbelievable magic. The other wizards nodded in agreement. This would definitely be an amazing feat. Ever so slowly, they pulled the willow branches apart and peeked out at Mrs. Perrette's flowers. She was watering them and noticed the 3 wizards looking at her. Mrs. Perrette waved, but the wizards took no notice. They looked in wonder at all the beautiful flowers and clapped for Wizard Orbis. Then they all waved to Mrs. Perrette and shot back under the willows. Katie told her friends it was almost unbelievable how magic they really were. The boys had to admit it was true. Orbie burbled it was her turn. Katie thought for a minute, and then she crouched low and walked all around the willow tree, and she told them she would make the willow tree whisper. Well, I have to tell you, just hearing such an impossible thing made Orbie and Miguel stop pretending for a moment. Miguel pointed out, birds sing, they sing anyway, so he knew his magic could come true. And Orbie softly burbled to Katie that he had done the same thing. Everybody knew the flowers were out. But trees never whispered, they couldn't even talk. Orbie and Miguel both looked at Katie and told her that she should change it to something else. Katie smiled at both of them. You have to believe in magic, she pointed out. The tree would whisper, maybe not right now, but soon. And with that, she suggested a flying wizard game. She climbed up on the low branch and said she was flying as she jumped down, arms outstretched. Miguel climbed up next, and he did the same thing, only he whooped when he jumped off. Orbie climbed up a little higher and did a somersault in the air. The other 2 wizards applauded. They were very impressed. Orbie pointed out that the tree hadn't whispered yet. He nurbled Katy could easily change her mind and do something like make the grass green, if she wanted. Katy kissed Orbie on the end of his long nose, and she told him that right now the tree had nothing to say. Orbie and Miguel looked at each other. They really weren't sure that Katy understood the game. Miguel scratched his head with his wand, and then he raised it up and told them it was now time for the Wild Wizard Dance. Orbie made a tooting, beeping sound that was perfect for wild wizard dancing. And all the wizards began to boogie him. I have to tell you, it was wild. Orbie ran up the tree and flipped over onto his feet again. Katy wiggled and waved her arms, and Miguel pretended his wand was making him dance, and it was very, very funny. Pretty soon it was time to head home for some juice. The wizards hid their wands in the branches of the tree. Orbie asked Katy again if she wanted to do another wand wish. Katy smiled. The tree would whisper. Orbie shook his head. He couldn't understand why Katy kept saying that. The three friends parted the branches and headed over to the sidewalk. Mrs. Perrette waved goodbye to them, and they waved back. And as they turned toward Katy's, a very surprising thing occurred. The tree's branches rustled in the wind, and Katy beamed. Orbie and Miguel stood stock still. Orbie burbled in the softest voice that the tree was whispering. Miguel, who was listening very hard, turned to his two friends and told them he knew what the tree was saying. Katy giggled with delight. Miguel smiled. It had invited him to come back and play another day. Well, Orbie just stood and looked from Katy to Miguel, and then he threw his arms around Katy and told her she was the most magical wizard of all time. And do you know, I think at that very moment maybe she was. And I hope the next time you're out in nature, you'll listen for the whisper of the trees. I just happen to know that the trees would love it if you came back to play with them, too.
That was built many, many years ago. It's so big that it took over 1,000 years to build. In fact, it's so big that you can even see it from outer space. Wow! That's a pretty big wall.